Well, good morning and welcome everyone to Maintaining Your Brain Health. This is a community dementia education program of Alzheimer's San Diego. We are a local nonprofit, and we will be sure to tell you more about ourselves at the end of the program here. Let's go ahead and get started. My name is Amy, and I'm the Director of Education here at Alzheimer's San Diego. And I am joined today by my colleague here in the Education Department, Jean. Good morning, Jean.
Morning. Hi, everybody.
We are also joined by our colleague in the Clinical Services Department, Allison. Good morning, Allison.
Good morning.
Very happy to have Allison with us here today. So with that, a quick look through our agenda. We're going to start by talking about the key factors, generally speaking, in healthy aging overall, but then specific to brain health in particular. We're going to talk about the common symptoms of dementia and how they are different from regular, normal age-related memory, cognitive, physical changes. We'll talk about the risk factors associated with the development of Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia. But then we're going to spend most of our time this morning focused on maintaining your brain health, as promised, the lifestyle factors that decrease the risk of developing dementia and experiencing cognitive decline generally as you age. So with that, I'm going to pop off here for a moment. I'm going to hand the remote control over to Jean.
Good. All right. Remote control is always a little reluctant to join with me, but there we go. So what we're going to do to start today is to review some of the key factors in healthy aging. And so let's just talk about the normal changes that are going on in our aging bodies. And, you know, I'm just thinking, this morning myself, I felt a little bit creaky. I'm getting a little creakier as I get older, meaning I'm a little stiffer in the mornings and I may have some occasional pain. The other thing I'm really noticing in myself right now is I'm getting pretty gray now. So, these are the changes that we see. My eyesight, I need different glasses for different, whatever different tasks I'm doing, depending on the distance. And so these are some of the things that I'm seeing and experiencing, also hearing changes, but certainly there's lots going on inside of our bodies that we're not necessarily seeing or necessarily being aware of. Our muscular build is changing. We do lose some muscle mass over time. And, our skeletal system is changing as well, too. We always kind of hear that proverbial thing that, you shrink as you get older. And it's, because the skeletal system, in addition to the muscular mass, is gravity's getting its impact on it. So we are losing some height as well, too. There's changes in our cardiovascular system where our hearts have been busy and our vascular system has been busy for a long, long time. And some of the efficiency in that system has decreased a little bit. And so the heart has to work harder to pump blood to our brains, to all of our body. And, the arteries and the veins and the capillaries in the vascular system aren't as flexible and pliable as they were when we were younger. And so there's some similar changes in the digestive system. For me, I can tell you my digestive system has slowed down. And most certainly, I'm not able to eat spicy food like I used to. It's just more, which I loved, and it's just more troublesome for me. And, as we've already mentioned, our sensory systems are changing, the eyes and the hearing, but also, our sensitivity to temperature changes. And, sometimes, certainly for some women, as they're getting older, if they're having menopause symptoms and having hot flashes, then they are running to the warm side. but certainly lots of people start to run to the cool side, the cold side. They feel cold more often and are needing to bundle up. And how our nose and our taste is our perception of what we are smelling and tasting is changing. Hence why we tend to, as we get older, tend to have more of a sweet tooth and or tend to be a little bit more generous with salt, looking for the salt component in taste. And of course, skin, clearly we look in the mirror and we see the changes there with age, with just some wrinkles and changes in the elasticity of our skin. So all these things going on, we know, and we're mostly aware of it, and accommodate as we need to. So these are all normal changes. And the brain is like every other system we have in our body. It's got some changes going on too. And so some normal changes that we see as we're getting older in our brain is that there is loss of volume. Okay, so I referred to the skeletal system becoming a little bit more compact and losing some muscle mass. In a similar way, the brain is getting just a little bit smaller in terms of size. We're losing a little bit of volume. And there is lessened communication between the neurons. Again, just the brain's been pretty darn busy all these years. And so the communication is slowing down a little bit. There's lessened and slower communication between the neurons. Because of the changes in the cardiovascular system that we talked about already, there is reduced blood flow to the brain, that the heart has to work harder to get the blood to all systems, including the brain. So what does this mean in terms of affecting our cognition and our memory? Well, there are some changes that do occur with normal aging. And so one of the things that we do tend to see is a little bit of decline in our memories. And maybe some of you folks have noticed that. I most certainly have. I have to work a little bit harder to remember some things. There are some things that I just can't capture in the moment. It's something I know well, the name of a person or a place or a thing. And I just can't, I can give you all sorts of descriptors about it, but I can't come up with, say, the name of that person. It'll come to me eventually, but it takes more time. Attention changes, our ability to focus and pay attention is not as good or as cute as it used to be. And so generally speaking, we have to make more of a concerted effort to pay attention and to be able to eliminate those distractions. And sometimes we need to actually physically eliminate them by turning off the TV or turning off the radio or the music to be able to really focus. And we definitely just have slower processing of information, where we may need to just read, perhaps if we have here's a good example. For me, I just got a new phone just about a month ago, and I've had to read through some of the instructions in the little booklet and online a couple of times over because it's a different phone than I had before. And so there's new ways to do things, and I'm having to take a little bit more time to process some of that new information. So these are all the normal changes that we see going on. So, what you doing there? Don't do that. So what are the factors that affect our health as we age? Well, there's a whole bunch of them. And so just starting at the top, certainly genetics plays a role in some of how our aging process comes about and how our health is being impacted as we're getting older, depending on what's going on genetically within our families. What have we inherited from parents, and or what have we maybe inherited in terms of also, I'm saying inherited, and I shouldn't use that word, but for the second point, for disease risk factors. So for example, in my family, heart disease is a very common health issue for people, my relatives, as we age. And so that's a risk factor for me. There may be a genetic link to it as well for me, because both my mom and dad had heart disease. So, we want to make sure that you have some understanding that sometimes it can be a genetic factor that's affecting our age, and sometimes it can be a risk factor. And additionally, environment obviously impacts our health as we age. We just think about our environment over the course of our lifetimes. Everything from culturally, what we eat for food, what our lifestyle is, kind of all the things that we do that's a part of the culture we belong to, that has some impact on how the aging process plays out with all of us. And that can be positive, or it could be negative as well too, depending. Our occupations, most certainly. I have often in this class referenced one of my grandfathers, who actually was my husband's grandfather, but I called him grandpa too. And he worked in some of the coal mines way back when. And no surprise, he developed, as he got older, what they call black lung disease from inhaling all that coal dust when he was a young man. So that certainly might still be an issue for some folks in certain parts of the country or in certain parts of the world. The new high risk factor these days for occupations is too much time sitting at the desk, sitting in the chair in front of the computer. So that's the big risk factor now, sitting and being sedentary. But there's others too. Education impacts our health as we age. To acquire the knowledge about, the things that are good for our health, the things that are not good for our health, plays a role in how our own health is impacted as we age. And certainly there's lifestyle and controllable factors for all of us. Sometimes we have the good knowledge, but we don't necessarily make the adjustments in our lifestyles. And, that's true for many of us. I include myself in that. So let's see here. I have to keep encouraging the control to move forward on the slides. I'm talking to it and encouraging it. So the lifestyle and controllable factors that we have are, I don't think, anything that is a big surprise to any of us. So what are we talking about for overall health? Well, I think we've all heard this certainly from our doctors, is we need to manage all of our numbers, which includes blood sugar. And that, by the way, that's not just for people who are diabetics. Some of the recommendations are coming out for all of us, the general population, to be screened, to have blood sugar tested at earlier ages, because we want to really stay on top of how our body is managing in terms of the pancreas and managing our blood sugars. So we want to have that being checked on a fairly regular basis, and certainly a continuously regular basis for people with diabetes. Blood pressure, of course, we want to keep that in the good and the normal range. And, if you do have high blood pressure, be monitoring it. There are lots of medications that are out there. Your doctor will be prescribing as is appropriate. And to just stay on top of that, that's an important part of this. For sure, your cholesterol. And again, that's something that when you see your doctor for your health screenings, you'll be getting that checked. And lots of people have cholesterol that is high and also need to take medications. and then body mass index. And of course, that is tied to our weight. So again, some numbers there, and, to try and keep ourselves at a healthy weight. Now, another important area here is smoking cessation. And, I think the trend has been, and it's a good trend, is that, there's been less smoking overall in particularly the older adult population. Lots of people no longer smoking. If they ever did, they're looking at programs to help stop smoking. Unfortunately, we are still seeing younger people are going to the vaping, which I actually know very little about, but sort of another avenue that some young people are going along. So hopefully the last I read was actually just a few days ago, is that the numbers are up for young people with the vaping. So hopefully that's something that we can, just as a public health issue, get a hold of. For sure, mental health management is very important. And, it's important throughout our lives. And it is important as we age too. This is not something that should fall by the wayside. We have a lot of different changes going on as we are aging, and life changes and changes in relationships and jobs. We may be retiring, we may have a spouse whose health isn't so good, or our health isn't so good. There's lots of reasons why mental health can become an issue for us as we are getting older. So it's an important part of things to pay attention to, and to have some trusted people with you who can help you pay attention to it. Sometimes we're in the thick of things and we don't see what's going on. And this can be particularly true for depression. And so it's good to have some checks and balances in the arena of mental health. And of course, it's very important to address sensory loss. One of the things that we know is a risk factor overall for potentially developing some type of dementia is hearing loss. And so being attentive to the changes in your hearing that you may be experiencing, seeing your doctor, getting your hearing tested, and then getting some of those aids, hearing aids. And by the way, there's such a variety of them anymore, and they're not all the big clunky hearing aids that would hang over the back of your ear. They've streamlined them so much. There's all sorts of, little tiny ones that go in the ear. There's really a wide variety that can be explored in terms of finding the right aid that is going to work for you. So for sure, we want to address those things. Okay, come on. This gosh darn remote control. I am going to turn this over to Amy now, and she is going to talk to us about, we've talked about normal age-related changes, and Amy now is going to talk about the symptoms of dementia and what is kind of the difference between what I've talked about and what she's going to talk about.
Great, thank you. Briefly, I just want to go back and just summarize. Jean went through the general lifestyle and controllable factors related to our overall health. And when it comes to brain health specifically, these are the areas we're going to focus on in this program here today. In our next segment, exercise and movement, diet and nutrition, cognitive activity, social connection, and the important and always difficult to obtain sleep and relaxation. But before we go there, let me describe the common symptoms of dementia, talk about what it is that we're here trying to reduce the risk of, talk about those symptoms and how they differ from normal age-related changes. So in brief summary, when we talk about Alzheimer's disease and other types of dementia, what specifically are we referring to here? Dementia is the word that we use to describe a syndrome, not any one particular disease, but a group of symptoms that are caused by some underlying medical condition that cause changes to a person's memory, cognitive function, problem-solving abilities, normal daily function. And Alzheimer's disease is one specific type of dementia, far and away the most common type of dementia, but only one of dozens of recognized medical conditions that cause these symptoms. So Alzheimer's disease is a progressive and degenerative disease of the brain, neurodegenerative, meaning it causes brain cells to die. And it is, again, the most common type of dementia. So when we talk about maintaining your brain health, we are speaking very broadly, both to people who do not yet have the pathology of Alzheimer's disease or another form of dementia in their brain and are interested in reducing their risk, but also to people who are living with dementia and want to keep those millions, billions of perfectly healthy brain cells that are still functioning well, keeping them functioning well. So let's go through, and I'll be brief about this, but talk about the difference between those normal age-related changes, which Jean described well at the beginning of the webinar, and what the possible symptoms of dementia might look like. So we generally classify them into these four broad categories at Alzheimer's San Diego of memory, thinking, physical symptoms, and behavioral symptoms. So Jean described well some of the normal age-related memory changes that we might be experiencing: difficulty with names, finding words, losing stuff around the house more often. But a symptom of dementia looks different. It's more like changing navigational skills, for example, getting lost, not in a new place. There's nothing unusual about that, but getting lost in a familiar place, in one's own home, in one's own neighborhood, in one's own city, and regions of it that are familiar to you. Misplacing objects, not uncommon, but forgetting the function of an object is in fact not a normal age-related change, right? Looking for your phone because you've lost it, no big deal. Holding your phone and not recognizing, oh, this is my phone, and not, for example, the remote control for the television, right? So there's a difference there. Changes in our thinking. Again, it's easier, it's normal for us to have a harder time learning new information, developing new skills, but as long as our brain is healthy, we can continue to do those things, albeit more slowly as we age. What's not normal is really being unable to learn something new, to retain information long enough and strongly enough for it to become something that you know, a bit of knowledge or skill. Difficulty with planning and sequencing is a common symptom in dementia as well. So tasks like cooking, for example, or driving a car require us to be able to think through multiple steps and think through sequences. And this becomes difficult for people when they are experiencing the symptoms of dementia. There are physical changes. Again, the sensory changes, vision, hearing, other senses that Jean described. What's not normal, however, is a very significant narrowing of the peripheral field of vision. We will all experience some of that to an extent as we age. But in people who are experiencing the symptoms of dementia, what we commonly see is a very narrow field of peripheral vision. And this, of course, has a lot of consequences for our depth perception, our ability to interpret contrast, our balance, and our gait generally, the way we walk is what we mean when we say gait. And then finally, behavioral symptoms. Jean talked about mental health changes as we age. Something important to keep in mind is that changes to your behavior, changes to your overall personality, your general demeanor, the kind of person that you are, aren't normal age-related changes. Typically, our behavior, the things we say, the things we do, the way we act, remains fairly stable throughout our lives, outside, of course, of things like illness, grief, stress, and mental health conditions. So do be aware that when there are changes to a person's mood or personality, when they're having a hard time initiating activities that they used to enjoy, or experiencing what we refer to as social withdrawal, just not wanting to participate, declining invitations, for example. These are not always the symptoms of dementia, but symptoms that we want to be aware of. What exactly puts us at risk for developing Alzheimer's disease and other types of dementia? The variables are, they vary widely. Age, though, is the primary risk factor for Alzheimer's disease and many other types of dementia as well. The older we get, the higher the risk, our individual risk category. Being female is also a significant risk factor for the Alzheimer's type of dementia, but do be aware. Plenty of men develop Alzheimer's disease, and there are forms of dementia, causes of dementia that men develop in greater numbers than women. But on the balance, being female is considered a risk factor for developing dementia because so many more women experience the symptoms or the pathology, the brain changes of Alzheimer's disease. Genetics and family history, it's a complicated relationship, but our genes do play a role, a small role, in our individual risk of developing Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. Most Alzheimer's, most forms of dementia are not inherited, inherited in that strictest sense. There are some genes that have been identified that are associated with an increased or a decreased risk of developing Alzheimer's disease, but they are just risk genes. They're not what we call deterministic. So we can't say, aha, this person has this particular genetic mutation, they're going to get Alzheimer's disease, or they have this particular combination of genes and therefore they're protected and they're not going to get Alzheimer's disease. We do know that it increases or decreases one's risk, whether or not these particular genetic markers are present, but we can't tell whether or not the person is or is not going to develop the symptoms. Having said all of that, your family history does play a role. In addition to those other health risk factors that Jean mentioned before, hypertension, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, those other health conditions that we do inherit risk factors for, they contribute to our risk of developing dementia. And our family history also is considered a risk factor if you've got a first degree relative. So that's a biological parent or a biological sibling who has or had Alzheimer's or another type of dementia, then you're considered higher risk. But again, outside of some rare forms of the disease, most dementia is not strictly inherited in the way we typically think of inheriting other types of health risk factors. The number of years of education that a person has had is a risk factor. If you've had a lower number of years of formal education, then you are considered higher risk than a person who's had more years of education. There's no magic number. And do keep in mind, we talk about formal education because it's what can be measured. How many years of schooling did a person attend? But as we'll talk about here later in the webinar, continuing to stay cognitively active, lifelong learning is part of the education that we talk about that does lower a person's risk of developing dementia. So it's not too late. This isn't just about the pursuing of a number of years of formal education and degrees. Finally, head trauma and Down syndrome are two risk factors that actually have more of a causal association than the rest of these risk factors that I've talked about. The rest of these, age, being a female, your genetics, your family history, your other health conditions, including that untreated hearing loss that Jean was talking about before, and your education levels. All of these things are risk factors, but they don't have a direct causal relationship, at least that we've identified. Having sustained head trauma, having had concussions from any number of sources, or having Down syndrome, which is a condition wherein a person has 3 copies of the 21st chromosome. These 2 conditions are pretty directly causally associated with the development of certain types of dementia. So individuals who've had head trauma are at high risk of developing CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Individuals with Down syndrome are at very high risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. Having said all of that, the fact remains there is no definitive evidence yet about, in most cases, what caused the Alzheimer's disease, and likewise about what we can do to prevent it or to stop it in its tracks. So I'm just going to sort of pause for a moment here and say, I know that there's a lot of information out there about preventative measures that one can take, about treatments that can halt or reverse the pathology, the spread of the proteins associated with Alzheimer's disease. There is some very interesting anecdotal evidence out there. There is a lot of interesting observational data out there, but what we're still lacking is good, solid, validated, double-blinded research that confirms for us techniques that will prevent, treat, halt, or cure Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia. So that's not to say that there isn't promising, interesting, exciting research out there. There is, and we'll talk about some of that. And we do talk about that in our annual research update that we do here at Alzheimer's San Diego. There's a lot of reason for optimism and hope on the horizon. But at the moment, according to the National Institute on Aging and most of the professional research community, we're not there just yet. So with that, Allison, can we pause and see if any questions have come up on the topic of key factors in healthy aging, the symptoms of dementia, risk factors, before we dive into the lifestyle factors?
So we had another question related to brain growth. Someone asked if our brain can grow neutrons.
Our brain, so neurons are the nerve endings at the ends of our brain cells. And yes, there is pretty solid evidence that our brains are able to neuroregenerate, right, to grow new neurons. But this is actually one of the sort of symptoms of a lack of brain health, is the brain's inability to do this. So a healthy brain absolutely can do this. Every time, as we'll talk about when we get to the topic of cognitive activity and cognitive stimulation, every time you have a new experience, you create a new memory, you learn a new thing, you're doing something called creating a new neural pathway, the sort of electrical connection, if you will, between those neurons, between the nerve endings at the ends of 2 brain cells. Every time you do that, you're creating a new one of those pathways, and you're essentially creating a workaround for your brain to work around damage, cells that have died, cells that are damaged for a variety of reasons, not just related to dementia, those normal age-related reasons that we lose brain cells that Jean was describing earlier. So what we really focus on more is the creating of new pathways between the brain cells rather than the brain's capacity to create the new cells directly.
And then there is a question regarding vitamins, minerals, and supplements, but I believe we'll get into that in a little bit.
We will, yes.
And then any update on research on preventing Alzheimer's? No,
Well, the short answer with that is not the answer we want to hear, but the reality of it is there's no known preventative activity, entity, medication, supplement, any of those things to prevent Alzheimer's disease. What we can do, and obviously what the focus here today is, what are the steps that I can take that will reduce my risk factors? You know, what are the things that are within my control? At this point in time, there's nothing out there to prevent Alzheimer's disease.
And if I can just clarify, I may have not been clear when I described this earlier. I don't mean to say that no one's looking at this. Nobody's trying to figure out how to prevent Alzheimer's disease. There is a lot of research that's happening, some really solid, good longitudinal studies with lots of subjects. And we'll talk about what much of the research, there is a lot of good research about this. We'll be talking about that in the rest of the program here today, what we know so far. But what we know so far tells us how to reduce your risk, not how to actually prevent. True prevention means we know you're not going to get it, right? That would mean something like a vaccine for Alzheimer's disease, or something that we could say, do these 3 things and you won't get it. So the research, the body of evidence isn't there yet. That's not to say that there aren't researchers looking at it.
Mm-hmm. And to that point, let me just say, and we'll talk about this in a different vein in a little bit here, but if you are seeing language around, you know, something out there that the claim is it will prevent dementia or prevent Alzheimer's disease, right away put on your skeptical hat and do some research, because in terms of the science that we apply to preventing diseases, it's not there yet for Alzheimer's. All right. I think we'll carry on here now. Well, let me see if I can maybe finally get this darn thing working. Come on. All right, so we're going to talk about the lifestyle factors that decrease the risk of developing cognitive decline as we age. And again, you know, really important to pay attention to that language. It decreases the risk of possibly developing dementia as we age. So we're talking about risk factors. So the number one thing that is really definitive and is solidly backed by research, folks, is that activity and movement is very, very important for our brain health. It's important for our overall physical health, likely mental health as well too, and most certainly for our brain health. The exercise, the activity, the movement itself is increasing the volume of blood vessels to the brain. And it is also increasing blood flow to the brain. And that's a good thing, because, you know, we want the brain, the environment of the brain, to be functioning at its best that it can do at that time, whatever age we're at. So we want to incorporate activity and movement into our daily lives so we can get that enriched blood flow to the brain and have that volume increased. Exercise is also stimulating the brain's ability to maintain not only the neural connections that we already have, but also to create new ones. And that was an interesting find in science and in research into dementia, because for a long time, the thought was that we don't create new neural connections as we get older, that what we have is what we have. And now we know that's not true, that exercising, again, this volume of blood and all the release of endorphins and the good chemicals that are being released with exercise is contributing to the environment of creating new neural connections. Exercise and activity also raises the level of the nerve growth factor. And guess what? Neurons are nerves. So, and we know that this nerve growth factor, the amount of it that's in our brain, increases with activity. So let's do it, folks. Why not? Let's give it a try. And what the recommendation is by the American Heart Association is to aim for 150 minutes of aerobic activity per week. How you parcel that out is up to you, and there's no one way that is better than the other way. So if you do 5 30-minute sessions or 3 50-minute sessions, or a couple of good brisk walks twice a day, every day, it's whatever works for you. And that's the important part of it, is that it needs to work for you so that you do it regularly. There's all sorts of research that supports that exercise is just such a terrific thing for us to do, clearly overall, but again, with some specificity to being a positive in hopefully preventing cognitive decline later on in our lives, or managing those risk factors for that. So a very important thing for us to do with exercise. All right, let's see. There, okay. So staying well nourished. Well, I don't know about all of you folks, but I enjoy my food, and I hope you do too. And, you know, I think we're all fairly savvy people. We know what it is that by and large we should be eating, and by and large what we shouldn't be eating. So we do want to be eating plenty of, yes, our vegetables, our leafy greens, our bright colored vegetables. Eat your spinach, be like Popeye. Eat your broccoli, all, you know, just all of those good vegetables. I don't think there's a bad vegetable in the bunch, although some people might say Brussels sprouts. So, or kale. I like kale myself. So eat your vegetables, eat your fruits, get a nice variety of fruit in there as well too. Whole grains and cereals. Because these are some of the things that not only aid in digestion, but they are the things that help give us that sense of feeling full. And, you know, they also truthfully keep us regular in terms of our how our bowel is working. And so we need to have those whole grains and cereals as well too. Legumes, we definitely need to have some legumes. So I'm going to ask you, throw it in chat for me. What am I talking about when I'm talking about legumes, people? What are legumes? Come on, let's see some chat answers. Tell me what a legume is. Beans, 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 indeed. Tofu. Who's considered lentils for sure. I'm not sure if tofu is considered a legume. Edamame, that's a good question. I don't know if that's considered a legume either. I'm going to have to look at that. But for sure, these other things that have mentioned all you know, the beans and the lentils and some of that good stuff. So make sure you're getting some of that. And then, of course, there's fish. Now, how many of you folks like fish? I happen to love fish. I never met a fish that I didn't really rather like. So with regards to fish, there are some specific types of fish that are kind of extra good for us. So I want to see how savvy you folks are. So we've got this acronym for some of the good fish that are out there that we want to try and incorporate into our diets. And the acronym is SMASH. And so each of these letters is representing a particular type of fish. So let's see how savvy we all are. So what is that first S? And in fact, it was answered in chat here. It is, come on, you silly thing here. Salmon, there we go. And then our M, mackerel. Do you think that's the answer? Aha, it is. Good job there, Monica. All right, what do you think the A is, folks? Ahi tuna. I happen to really enjoy ahi tuna. It's not ahi tuna though. Think. Yeah, there we go. Come on, anchovies. Whether you like them or don't, that's pretty black and white kind of question. You either love them or you don't. They are salty. And if you have hypertension, of course, you need to be watching your salt intake. So you have to think about those things as well, too, as regards your diet. You know, you could always rinse off the anchovies. What's the next one? Sardine. We do have some smart people here. You're right, it is sardines. And I never met a sardine I didn't enjoy too. But again, you have to watch the salt content, and sometimes they're really in heavy oil. And so you want to maybe just blot them on a paper towel, but also look at what kind of oil are they in. So what is that last H? Halibut. I love halibut. But it's not halibut. What is it? Herring. Another one of those little, as my husband says, those stinky little fish. So these are all the good fish that we want to try and incorporate into our diets. And if some of the ones like the sardines and the herrings just seems too, it's just not to your taste, too darn difficult, you know, go with the salmon. And, you know, really what we're getting here from all of these fish is they're cold water fish that have high levels of the omega-3 fats in them. And that's some of the stuff that's really good for our brains. And so we go back to staying well nourished for a minute so we can round things out. And in addition to fish, then, you know, we need healthy fats. Fat is an important part of the diet. It's part of what helps food taste good, and it gives us good mouthfeel. And, you know, that's some of the sensory things that our brain is telling us when we're eating that gives us satisfaction when we eat. And that's important because if we're not feeling satisfied by what we're eating, that's when we tend to go for maybe the foods that aren't so good. So, so think about that. And the healthy fats do come from oils, nuts, and seeds. Think about your olive oils. Think about, you know, canola oil is an option as well too. Certainly there's other types of oils that are out there. Olive oil seems to be by and large the one that is, you know, really almost universally recommended. And no, you don't need to go buy the fancy expensive stuff from Italy unless you choose to. We've got some absolutely fantastic California olive oils right here. Nuts and seeds can be also a good source of those healthy fats, and also can be very satisfying in terms of just taste. Sprinkling some of those nuts and seeds on your salad, give that a try. Moderate amounts of alcohol, folks, which doesn't mean we're recommending everybody goes out there and drinks moderate amounts of alcohol on a regular basis. Always a good thing to talk about with your doctor, because it's important to be looking at alcohol consumption in combination with any health conditions you may have going on right now. And additionally, any medications you may be taking. If you don't drink, you know, doesn't mean you need to start, that's for sure. And when we're talking about moderate amounts, talk to your doctor about that as well too. There definitely are recommendations in terms of what describes moderate, but there's also individual interpretations of moderation as well too. So for, an older woman on medications that is very slight, meaning maybe weighs, 115 pounds, what might be considered a moderate amount of alcohol for that person as compared to, an older man that is 6'2" and 210 pounds. So we're talking about some different definitions of moderate. We definitely want to keep to a minimum the amounts of saturated fats, dairy, meat, and poultry. Okay, so we want to stick more with the plant-based part of the diet. Saturated fats, these are the fats that are not good for us. These are the fats that contribute to cholesterol buildup and contribute to just problems overall in health. With regards to dairy, if you love dairy, as I do, look for the low-fat or fat-free versions. And so, for example, I love milk. I've been a milk drinker all my life, and I'm not going to stop that, but I do now, and have for years, go with the fat-free versions of milk. And meat and poultry, try to keep, if you do like your red meat, try to keep your consumption of that to a minimum. And with regards to poultry, again, go for the leaner cuts, go for the breasts, chicken breast or turkey breast versus some of the leaner cuts, and without skin as well too. And lastly, stay hydrated. And this is very, very important as throughout our lives and as we age as well too, folks. We need to just really make sure we're keeping our water intake up. And, I think, doesn't mean you can't count the cup of coffee that you've had in the morning, but again, kind of talk those things through with your doctor. I would think overall, the recommendation would be to get more of your fluid intake from water than you do from, say, coffee or tea or something else. So for sure, do your best to kind of by some of these guidelines, and it has great benefit for us for our overall health, our heart health, and our brain health. And now, Amy, you are back up.
I am. Thank you, Jean. And I do see there are some good questions coming in, and just want to reassure you, Allison will answer some of those, and we will be pausing again for questions later in the program. So don't feel ignored. And I do want to just add a couple of things. First, I want to clarify soybeans are legumes. So yes, that was a correct answer earlier when Jean was quizzing everyone. The issue of sort of processing food, though, comes up when it comes to the question of tofu. And there's also tofu, by the way, is processed soybeans and water. Sorry if I didn't explain that. So all foods become a little less nourishing when we process them. And on a related note, I just want to mention some recent, very interesting research about the regular consumption of processed meat, cured processed meats. This is your bacons and your salamis, those types of things. There is some interesting observational evidence, and we're waiting for larger studies to confirm this, though, that the regular consumption, even a small bit, if it's on a daily basis, of processed meats like bacon are associated with increased dementia risk. So again, this is not clear-cut evidence, but we do like to share new research when it's coming out, something that we're sort of keeping an eye on. But to Jean's good broader point, keeping your consumption of processed foods as much as possible to a minimum, reducing the amount of trans fats that are in your diet, to the scantest amount possible. These are all good things for our overall health, but also known to be good for our brain health as well. So let's move on to outside of diet and exercise. What else can we do to maintain our brain health? So you gave me a good opportunity earlier in the program to talk about the creation of new neural pathways, right? This connection between the nerve endings at the ends of the connections between our brain cells. So there is a theory that is known as the theory of cognitive reserve, and what this theory tells us. It's sort of a working assumption of a lot of folks in the research community that staying cognitively active, having novel experiences, meaning doing new things, right? Meeting new people, going to new places, learning new facts, practicing speaking in a different language, right? That novelty, one of its primary benefits when it comes to reducing your risk of dementia, it's not quite as black and white as we might think. It's not that engaging in ongoing learning and staying intellectually curious and active and staying cognitively stimulated. It's not that we have evidence that shows that doing those things causes your brain not to overproduce the proteins associated with Alzheimer's disease, for example. But what we do have evidence is that it allows your brain to create more of these pathways to work around damage that exists. So if you think about how people recover from strokes and brain injury, right? Regrowing the brain cells, repairing the neurons is very difficult, if not impossible, depending on the nature of the damage. But what we can do is teach the brain to work around that damage. So this theory of cognitive reserve as it relates to brain health is all about that. Give your brain every opportunity to work around any damage that it might be sustaining related to the early presence of Alzheimer's disease or other types of dementia. And what we'll see is that there will be a delay in when the person experiences the symptoms related to the damage. So very interesting sort of body of research and evidence out there with regard to this theory of cognitive reserve. So we work with it, right? The recommendations generally are keep having new experiences, new challenges, engaging in games, puzzles, problem solving. I saw the inquiry that was in the chat or the Q&A regarding other games aside from Brain HQ, and there are a lot of them out there. We can provide you with a list if you'd like some. I could throw some ideas in the chat if you're interested, but I'm thinking of programs like Elevate, Lumosity, Cognifit. There's one called KenKen. There are a few of them out there. Most of them have a version you pay for, but most of them also have a free version. So playing games on the computer, playing games on your phone, brain apps becoming very, very popular. Are they good for your brain? Generally speaking, yes, although I'm going to be talking about sleep here in a moment, and the more screen time you have, the more disrupted sleep tends to be. So you have to think about kind of weigh the pros and cons of that. But engaging in games, puzzles, things that require you to solve problems, to use strategy, and even better if they are sort of analog. It's something that requires you to use your fingers, to use your motor skills, and best of all, if they involve other people. Right? Doing a puzzle with another person is even more impactful than just doing a jigsaw puzzle by yourself. But if that's not an option, do the puzzle by yourself, right? Playing solitaire, it passes the time. And if you're playing it with actual physical cards, then, you're engaging cognitively, using your fine motor skills. But solitaire doesn't really involve any strategy, right? A little, but for the most part, you're waiting for the right cards to come. Whereas when you're playing poker, mahjong, Scrabble, right, you're doing games that involve some strategy, you have to engage a lot more regions of your brain. So that's the short answer on things like games and puzzles. People often have a lot of questions about that. Keep learning. As I mentioned before, lifelong learning is critically important to our brain health. It doesn't mean enrolling in school and pursuing additional degrees of study. It means, get one of those calendars that gets you to learn a new word every day. Pick up a musical instrument, maybe that you always wanted to learn how to play, or that you used to play and you've stopped playing. Learning new skills, it doesn't mean you have to become fluent in that language. Pick up a couple of key phrases and try them out from time to time. This is really great for our brain. Music is probably the most impactful of all of the cognitively stimulating activities. There's a lot of really interesting anecdotal and validated sort of quality research out there about the impact of music on our brain health. So it's good for us to listen to music, both music that we know and that we can sing along to, because that's making those connections is really good for our brain health. You're creating all those, you're strengthening those neural pathways, but also listening to new music that you don't know exposes you to new things, and again, creates those new connections. Listening to music, singing along to music, and playing music. If you play music, this is sometimes referred to as the equivalent of like an all over body workout, right? But just for your brain, because it engages so many different lobes and regions of the brain all at once. It requires you to use your fine motor skills and engage so many different cognitive domains at the same time. The bottom line, as with food, right? We're not recommending that you eat food that you don't like because it's good for your brain health. We're also not recommending that you play games that you don't find personally enjoyable or meaningful, right? Engage in activities that have personal meaning, give you a sense of purpose or enjoyment. So those are the best ones. And as I mentioned before, all activities are more impactful when we do them with other people. Humans are primates. We are social. We are wired for social connectivity. One of the great limitations of Zoom is how much we have to struggle. We don't get to make eye contact with other people and really engage socially the way that we're sort of wired and programmed to do. But we're making the best of it for now. There is a relationship. Researchers have identified a relationship between people who engage regularly in social activities and the strengths, the abilities with regard to their cognitive function. There is an association there. The stronger your network of social support, and I don't mean the size of your network of social support, just the fact that you have a few quality social connections and that you're regularly engaging with other human beings, this actually is associated with better brain health overall, but in particular, higher functioning memory, higher problem solving abilities. And notably, as we age, what the evidence shows us is that people who stay more socially active as they age tend to have better overall health habits, but in particular, brain health habits. So I like to joke, it's like peer pressure, being around your friends and your peers when you're young sort of influences you to do stupid things, right? Things that aren't maybe so good for your health and your well-being. But as we age, staying active, staying socially connected with our peers, this actually is associated with being healthier. People who are more social tend to eat better. They get more exercise. They do more new cognitively sort of novel stimulating activities. They sleep better. They have all of these that their overall health, and in particular, the activities that are associated with good brain health, they're stronger in those areas. So stay socially connected. If this is an area that is a challenge for you, please reach out. Let us know how we can help you with this. We have social activities that we run at Alzheimer's San Diego, or we can help you identify resources in your community, senior centers, libraries, YMCAs, for example. Lots of free or low-cost ways to engage socially in your community. And now the big topic that's often on a lot of people's minds, sleep and relaxation. This is a tricky one, and this is one that's hard for a lot of people to think about too much, because sleep is an area where a lot of people really struggle. But it's an important one. And I like to say that sleep is really, of all of these things that we've talked about here today, I think sleep may be the most important, because without it, you can't really do any of the rest of the stuff we've been talking about, right? Making the effort to plan, to create a healthy meal plan and do the shopping for that healthy food, to get regular exercise, to engage in learning and stimulating games, puzzles, activities, to engage socially. All of this requires energy. And if you're not sleeping well, it's very hard, if not impossible, to muster the energy to initiate those things, but also to get the real benefits from them. So I'll make my plug for sleep and relaxation being among the most important of these lifestyle factors that we're talking about. I don't want to scare anybody, but if this is an area where you're struggling, I would encourage you to talk with your doctor, not about getting sleep medications. It's actually sort of last resort, but thinking about strategies you can incorporate into your life, ways that food, drink, medications that you're taking, screen time, right? All of those types of things, ways that they may be impacting the amount and the quality of your sleep. There is growing evidence that poor sleep may actually increase a person's risk of Alzheimer's disease. Some research came out just a couple of months ago, pretty large study, a pretty well-run study that shows that sleeping too little in what the study authors called midlife, and they were referring to people between the ages of 50 and 60, sleeping too little, and their definition of too little was 6 hours of sleep a night or less, was associated with a significant increase of dementia risk later in life. So keep that in mind. This is one recent study of many studies that are out there that show us the importance of sleep. I did see a question earlier in the Q&A about why women are at such a greater risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. That is not yet fully understood, if it's hormonal in nature, if it's something about lifestyle, but there is some speculation that sleep has something to do with this, that one of the functions of deep sleep is to clear the brain of the accumulations that cause the pathology of Alzheimer's and other types of dementia. And women have a much higher rate of sleep disturbance throughout their lives than men do, for a variety of reasons. Right? Pregnancy, childbearing, child rearing, hormonal changes, other mental health issues, and just sort of the general lifestyle factors that are connected to the quality of our sleep tend to affect women more heavily than men. And so this may be one of the reasons, but it is not well understood why that is. So it's a common misunderstanding that as we age, we don't need as much sleep. That is simply not true. All adults under the age of 65, over the age of 65, need somewhere in the neighborhood of 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. There are very small numbers of people who can get by, be perfectly healthy with less, but they are a very small percentage of the population. Most of us need those 7 to 9 hours. But we are going to sleep differently as we age, as I probably don't need to tell anyone here, right? We wake up more often because of pain or needing to go to the bathroom, or any number of reasons at different times in our lives, hot flashes, lots of different reasons that might happen. But we still need to get through a complete sleep cycle several times per night, even if it doesn't all come in one 7 to 9 hour chunk, the way that it might have when we were younger. So just a couple of very brief tips on what is called sleep hygiene, how we sort of take care of the health of our sleep. Establishing routines and rituals around both bedtime and waking. Training your brain for sleep. This just refers to making the bed or the bedroom a place where you aren't on your phone, you don't do work there, you don't engage in crafts or other activities, right? That the bed is for some very limited and focused activities, so that your brain starts to sort of associate it with sleep and not with things that are cognitively stimulating. Keeping the room comfortable for most people, this means making it quite dark and making it quite cool. But you know what makes your room comfortable. Limiting naps. Naps are fine, but if they are disruptive to your nighttime sleep cycle, then you want to consider changing that schedule. And then, of course, considering ways that your food, alcohol, caffeine intake might be disruptive to your sleep cycle. And exercise, back to that, the topic early in our discussion of these lifestyle factors. All of these things are associated with each other, as I hope you can see, right? Getting plenty of exercise helps you sleep better. You need good sleep in order to have the energy to exercise well, to exercise enough. You need a good healthy diet to give you the energy to benefit from that exercise, right? It is all interrelated. But exercise is an important regular physical aerobic activity, especially activity that's outdoors and gets you some exposure to the sunlight during the daytime hours. This is associated with better sleep for a lot of people and can really help kind of reset the sleep clock, if you will. So just a couple brief tips on that.
Good. Well, we're starting to wind down here a little bit. So we've talked about lots of different things here today. And here's the thing, is that if you are concerned about what you think is some changes in your cognition, in your memory, and just your ability to kind of think things through, process information, any kind of concerns that you have, find that, for sure there's other conditions other than Alzheimer's disease, other than dementia, that can cause some of these changes in memory and cognition. And it could be medications that we're on. It could be prescribed medications, or it could be over-the-counter medications as well, too. An example being, if you are using some things like for cold medicine or for sleeping, I can't remember what some of them are called, but sleep time PM or something like that. Some of those types of over-the-counter medications can cause kind of foggy brain, foggy thinking. And so it's important to consider those as well too. So it might be medications. The other thing is it could be depression. The symptoms of depression align very closely with the symptoms of dementia. And we do see depression is an issue for many people through the general population, most certainly as we age, because there are challenges that are kind of particular, specific to aging. And it's everything from, loss of some physical functioning to loss of potentially a partner, a life partner. Our friend circles are shrinking, all sorts of things like that. The other thing is depression has become much more of a general population issue through the pandemic for people of all ages. So again, paying attention to mental health is really important, and know that changes in mental health can sometimes look like dementia. Any kind of other illness or infection that is going on that you might not be aware of. Sometimes an infection or an illness that's kind of under the radar that we're not really experiencing other symptoms of, but we go see the primary care physician and get a regular workup done. And lo and behold, guess what? There's something else going on. So if you're concerned, talk to your doctor. Share your concerns with your doctor, and maybe share with others too within your inner circle, your support network. Sometimes I think it's good for us, if we're having some concerns about something, to sit down with the people we love and who know us best and say, look, I'm a little worried about such and such. I'm saying, in this case, let's say I'm a little worried about my memory and cognition. What do you see happening in me? So do a little bit of a check-in with them and see what kind of feedback you get. And, sometimes the feedback might be to the point where you say, yeah, okay, I think I am going to talk, make an appointment to talk to my doctor about this. Or it might be enough that, the feedback is nobody else is really seeing anything. Well, maybe you make an agreement to check in another couple of months on this thing to see if your family network and friend network is still saying, you seem like you're the same person you've always been, and we don't see any changes in you, or we do see changes in you. You can always pursue a memory screening, and you can get a memory screening through your primary care physician. You can just request it. Ask them. You don't even need to necessarily say there's anything going, I'm a little worried or that there's something going on. Just when you go in for your regular wellness checkup, ask them to do a memory screening. And so what you've got then is a picture of where your cognition and memory is at that day, at that point in time. And then next year, when you come in for your wellness check, you can get that screening done again. And you and your primary care physician can compare, see, has there been any changes? And of course, if you're feeling really concerned about things, again, talk to your healthcare provider, your primary physician, and you can advocate for further diagnostic procedures to take place in order to see what's going on. So, and you can advocate for that for a spouse or a family member or someone you love as well, too. Sometimes people do get some pushback from their doctors who are saying, I don't think anything's going on, everything's fine. But if it's really bothering you, that you feel something's going on, then be a strong voice for yourself and, for anybody that you're advocating for. So, another important part of things here, folks, is these are websites. We're not going to go through them all. Remember, you're going to get this information in the email we send out to you at the end of today's class. So you'll have all these websites at your fingertips. And these are websites that are credible, good sources of information for more disease information on dementia, Alzheimer's disease and dementia. But I want you to also kind of think about this in terms of any kind of general information that you are seeking, and particularly, I'm going to say, with regards to our health and well-being. Although it certainly goes beyond that. It is important that you seek out credible sources of information. And to that point, there is a whole heck of a lot more non-credible sources than there are good sources. So you need to be a smart and a savvy user of the internet and consumer. So, you could Google dementia, and maybe many of you have, and I certainly have, and you'll just get page after page of websites. And don't be thinking that, the top 5 or 10 websites that comes up in your Google search means that they're the best ones to go to. That's not how it works. So it's really important for all of us to seek out these sources of information that are credible, are accurate, and that are not, seeking profit from any of us as consumers. We want information that is free and open to the public. And so check out some of these websites. And if you are wanting more information in this area about some guidelines, really, about how do I seek out good sources of information, give us a call or fill out one of those forms for some follow-up, and we can get that information to you. So let's see here. I think you're up now, Amy.
Yep, we're gonna pause for some questions.
What have we got?
So we, from earlier, we were asked what kind of nootropics are recommended.
Nootropics recommend, they're actually the only nootropic that I'm aware of that is actually prescribed for Alzheimer's or other types of dementia is memantine, Namenda. The others, they are legitimate pharmaceutical drugs, but they're really used for other neurologic conditions, sleep disturbances, narcolepsy, ADHD, that type of thing. So to my knowledge, that is the only one that is actually used as a tool for the management of dementia symptoms. But none of them are associated, to my knowledge, with the prevention of dementia symptoms or treatment outside of memantine. But having said that, I know there's some questions about supplements. I just kind of want to give a very broad answer to those questions. There are no known dietary supplements, meaning particular vitamins, minerals, nutraceuticals, or products like I saw a specific question about Prevagen and others. None of these items have, while they in their commercials they can say things like they have clinical studies that show that they're effective. Clinical studies is actually just it's not a scientific term. I could do an experiment in my kitchen and call it a clinical study. There just isn't adequate good evidence that any of these supplements are associated with prevention or treatment of dementia symptoms. That's not to say that taking things like vitamin D, if you have a vitamin D deficiency, right, this is a supplement worth taking. That's not to say that vitamins, supplements, nutraceuticals serve no purpose, because for an individual person, they absolutely may. This is a good conversation to have with your individual healthcare provider, a pharmacist, a source of credible information for you. What I don't want you to do, though, is to get information from someone who is selling a program, someone who is selling books, right? You want to talk to people who know you, who know your individual situation and know whether or not you need that individual supplement.
Totally would agree with that. That's the just another layer to being the savvy consumer.
Yeah.
So I see there is a question in Q&A that, we've been focusing on kind of brain health and managing risk factors, and with a kind of a goal of reducing the risk of developing dementia. And then the question is, but will these recommendations also help someone who already has been diagnosed? And absolutely they will. Having a diagnosis of dementia doesn't preclude a person from participating in some brain healthy activities and having had that have some impact. You may have a diagnosis of dementia, but you still got a whole, as Amy would say, billions and billions of brain cells and neurons there that are working, and let's do whatever we can to support their working effectively for as long as possible. So, we're not talking about this as it's going to stop the Alzheimer's disease or the dementia. It's not a cure. It's not a prevention. But boy, oh boy, just in the same vein as if I, am diagnosed with heart disease today and my doctor says, you can't have bacon anymore. I'm going to give up bacon. I love bacon, but I'll give it up. So, we want to look at dementia in that same vein. Is it doesn't mean you just stop doing all the things that are good for you. Keep doing them.
I absolutely echo that sentiment, Jean, and also want to emphasize or re-emphasize in particular, the value of physical activity and exercise. This is sort of the one lifestyle factor that we've been talking about where there is evidence that this actually improves memory, cognitive function, and overall well-being for people who are living with Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. Getting regular exercise, as a physician colleague of mine used to say, we still have no pill that's better than exercise, right? When it comes to this, for anything, but in particular as it relates to Alzheimer's disease. So yes, while these factors that we're talking, these habits that we're talking about, eating well, staying active, staying cognitively engaged, and being socially active, and focusing on the quality of your sleep, even though there isn't adequate evidence yet that these things will halt, delay, stop the progression of the disease, there's every reason to do them, or to support someone you know who's living with dementia in doing these things, because it'll keep what's there as healthy as possible. I love that question. Thanks for asking it.
All right.
Well, it's about that time. We're gonna wrap things up. Allison, if you would one more time in the chat, put out the link to our folks and let them know how they can reach out to ask any additional questions that they might have, get information, get emotional support, or find out information about any of these free programs and services that we offer at Alzheimer's San Diego. And as I sometimes like to say, even if you don't know why you're reaching out, if you just feel like you need something and you don't know what it is, that's okay too. Our team of dementia experts is here to help. So we can connect you to support groups, to additional education programming that might be valuable to you, to volunteer services. We have telephone reassurance check-in programs for people who living with dementia who live alone. We have companionship respite program for people who have a care partner that needs a little bit of a break on a weekly basis, and many other sources of free support. So please reach out. Let us know how we can help. You can find lots of good information on our website about the various causes of dementia, the treatment methods that are out there, and lots of tips for care partners in terms of communicating and staying healthy, both the person living with dementia and the care partner. You can find that information on our website. You can call us. You can live chat us from our website, or again, fill out that follow-up request form that Allison is putting out in the chat, and we'll be happy to reach out and get you connected to what you need. A couple of programs coming up. The next one in particular is germane to much of what we've been talking about here today. On November 10th, a week from today, we will be doing a program on the topic of medications, both how to support a person with dementia in managing medication safely, but also I'll be co-presenting that with a geriatric pharmacist who can answer questions about medications and supplements. So if you've got questions on that topic, please consider attending that program next Wednesday. And then on Saturday, November 20th, we'll be doing a program primarily for care partners on the topic of how to broach difficult subjects, a good holiday, timely holiday topic. If you're noticing changes in yourself or someone that you know and need to initiate a challenging conversation about getting a diagnosis, considering additional sources of support, hard conversations about driving, for example, that's what that program will focus on. So just two of our upcoming programs. There's a whole calendar available on our website, alzsd.org, where you can get more information. So when this webinar ends, you'll be directed to a brief survey. We would appreciate your feedback. It is anonymous, so please share freely your comments on this program and suggestions for other topics that you would like to learn more about. We read those, we take them to heart, and we really appreciate your feedback. So we will be emailing out a copy of these slides, as I mentioned at the beginning of the program. A recording of this webinar will be available in our webinar library by next week. And we really appreciate everybody coming today, asking good questions and engaging with us. We really appreciate that. Our thanks to Tanvi for being here. We can't see you, but we know you've been here. Thank you for supporting us and our folks here in the webinar today. And of course, my sincere thanks to Allison and Jean for all of your good information and support provided in the webinar today.
Yeah, it was good. Thank you, everybody. Keep those questions coming for us, okay? Let's now go and eat some nice stinky little herring or something like that for lunch. Okay, we'll see you all.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.